Many will point to the corner goal which Arsenal depended on once again, another set piece to win away at Fulham 1-0. But for me, the game, the intent, certainly from Arsenal, and some of the ideas that we showed on pitch was, I think, they signified a real shift into what we've been seeing all season of how this Arsenal team are trying to break down those stubborn blocks who block out and shut out the middle of the pitch. I saw so much intent and aggression and new ideas that we're going to pack into this instant reaction today, which I'm so excited to begin on the channel, the first of many. Welcome back to the Harvey Gratian YouTube channel. I'm so glad you found us or are joining us once again. And I want to speak about today the importance of some of these new ideas to Arsenal's play, that clustering and that narrowness that I've spoken about a lot in the analysis on the channel. I also want to speak about the importance of diagonals to Arsenal's block breaking. I want to speak about the roles of Calafiori, of Timber, who feels like Jurrien Timber, and I'll get onto this more, a real index to the changes we've seen for Arsenal this season. I want to speak about Saka, of course, and so much more. I want to speak about the intricacies that we saw and the subtleties in this sort of tactical battle between Arteta and Marco Silva that we're going to get into straight away, starting with Arsenal's first half intentions on the build-up. You can see the base that I've got with this tactic board here. We're going to leave this pretty quickly, but these were the opening ideas, with Trossard wide on the left, hinging often lower to promote those marauding Calafiori runs through the half space. But particularly interesting with the Calafiori runs were that they were more diagonal today, and we did that for a number of reasons, but the most significant one was to pull out Castagna, the fullback, and promote more of these arcing runs to get more out of Gyokeres in this more last line role that he played today, which, again, although he didn't have many touches, he was so much more involved, and this was a reason for it, how we were trying to do that with the dynamics around him. So Calafiori, as always, was hunting around the pivot of Rice and Zubimendi, looking for gaps and advantages, and he felt, once again, like our real connector from the build-up phase into the final third. If we move to Rice and Zubimendi, they once again were shifting and changing their heights. Timber, as he grew more and more into the game, became that high and wide option for Saka, which promoted, and this is where things got really interesting, because we spoke about, against Newcastle, the central clustering for Arsenal. And we saw a very similar sort of idea for Arsenal again in the game, trying to bait this 4-4-2 block from Fulham to jump aggressively so we could stagger centrally and begin those vertical, fast, snappy, bouncy connections between everyone. But this is what I wanted to set up. This is what Arsenal and Arteta wanted to set up. Now, this was very fluid, and the distances and the angles were always shifting, but this is what we're going to work with as a base. Zubimendi is our lone six here, but it was, Rice, the same amount of time. Sometimes Eze came in and splitted, but this stack of three, Calafiori, Rice and Eze, in between the lines here, that felt like the real intention in this game for Arsenal. Once again, you have Calafiori's off-ball movements, but what was really significant to me is how this central clustering and narrowness grew in strength into the game, particularly as we got into the final third. So let's move here now and describe sort of what's on show, because we can talk about structures and almost like that 3-1-6 or that narrow diamond that Arsenal are trying to create centrally to play at speed, and all the movements that are happening to try and pull apart this Fulham block so we can then play that breaker and play at speed and try and break lines and attack the Fulham goal quickly. But in the final third, because this Fulham block is so tough to get through, there were some really interesting modifications to this stacking and narrow clustering that I want to tap into that will sort of inform Arsenal's ideas throughout all the game. So I want to start with, imagine Timber has the ball, because we saw a lot of the possession coming from these deeper right-hand zones when Arsenal were in the final third. And there's so much going on here, as you can probably see by the layout. And Timber, as I said in the beginning, feels like an index for the uptick in tempo, aggression, urgency from Arsenal and the new ideas to break lines. So the actual stack in between the lines here is your Zubimendi, your Calafiori and your Eze. But it can be Saka too. Like I said, it's very fluid. Saka can move inside like this and we can double up in the inside pockets. But what I want to focus on is how, especially in these final third positions, and this is how you're starting to incidentally win more corners and pull this Fulham block apart. Eze would make that half space dart. The arrow isn't actually very helpful here because once again it's at a diagonal. The same run that he made against West Ham for that Zubimendi slip ball, he'd make that diagonal run, and I think diagonal play in general is really unspoken about how it just kills blocks because it leaves shapes discombobulated essentially. Eze would make that run, and then Timbers essentially got different solutions available to him in this more touch-heavy on-ball role that Timber has, specifically without Martin Ødegaard on the right-hand side. He's got a lot more solutions. He can duck and drive inside into these areas as the Fulham wide midfielder was sucked to double up on Saka, or he can play that initial pass to Zubimendi, who's making that more aggressive position dart. Again, we're talking about that narrow clustering, getting lots of players ready to swarm the box. Timber can play that pass equally, or Saka can receive with momentum into these zones. And what I'd like to focus on now is how I've spoken a lot on the channel about timing, the timing of Arsenal's movements, when to quicken up the play or when to retain, when to stay wide and stretch the pitch, and when to flood the box. And one of the things I have yet to really get into on my analysis, which I'll probably do a dedicated video for into the week, is how we will see here it still looks pretty normal for Arsenal in terms of lane occupation. You've got Saka stretching wide, Zubimendi and Rice at the base, Calafiori, the other fullback, tucking in, and you've got a fairly rigid occupation of lanes with Eze, Gyokeres and Trossard. However, when we decide to go, we go and we swarm the box. So Timber, through those various methods, would break lines, whether it be Zubimendi making that higher dart or Saka going off him. And then all of a sudden, we're backing, and Arteta is backing the players to find solutions close, whether that's Eze slipping on the blind side and firing shots, where he can get Gyokeres in the box for knockdowns and second balls, those loose balls. Or if we reset and Saka moves back wide instead of Zubimendi, Timber can play that ball, and it might be Zubimendi on the end of it. And all of a sudden, you've got Gyokeres shoulder to shoulder with that centre-back. And here, he's much stronger than your typical back-to-goal situations because, again, of those diagonals. He can roll his man, as we saw a lot, and get into a shoulder to shoulder. He took shots quite early, and I think that was clearly a deliberate thing for Gyokeres because a lot's been spoken about how quickly it takes to get shots off, but it seemed really deliberate how early he was looking to shoot Gyokeres. And this summed up really with Calafiori trying to crash the box late. Again, we're talking about flooding the box. We're seeing Arsenal be selective of when we just abandon width and we get close and we try and play with each other here. And we get tight and we get players flooding the box because our rest defence net is still set with Rice rotating with Zubimendi. He's the one sitting lower in this passage, Gabriel and Saliba. It's still secure. It's that calculated risk I've been speaking about. And I now want to go on to some of our second half intentions because the clustering was exactly the same against Fulham, but the way we formulated it was completely different. And you could argue that it was a lot better. So we still found this stack of three in between the lines, but this time it was Rice dropping into the left centre-back spot. And essentially, it opens up the option of the big switch to Saka, which we saw as the game progressed more and more. But it moved Gabriel into this central centre-back position. Zubimendi's on his own in those inside pockets, playing in the cover shadows, trying to essentially accelerate play if he can be accessed in that build-up pocket in between these Fulham front two. Timber was the one who promoted alongside Calafiori, so we doubled up the fullbacks in these inside higher pockets with Timber making this start, and we timed really well, I think, tactically in the game, the fullbacks making the underlaps to open up the routes into these wide areas. And this would push Eze, who I've got a few thoughts on really, into this very central role where he can be, we spoke about Newcastle, that backboard. So if we can get it into Zubimendi and we can speed things up, Eze can play at 1 and 2 touches and bouncing it into the arriving fullbacks. And then you've got Gyokeres leaning off the last line and we're ready to attack from inside the block quickly when originally it looks pretty settled, doesn't it? But for Eze, it was a lower touch, higher impact role in theory. And that's why when Mourinho came on essentially like for him, that suits Mourinho extremely well. But these are the ideas that Arsenal are starting to get behind here. And obviously it was a little bit different in the second half with this, but it worked so much better. I want to leave the tactics board for just a second and focus on Bukayo Saka, because I think the amount of solutions, the team as a whole, first of all, are showing more and more against these stubborn blocks. And I think the phrasing I would put in a question is, yes, it's another corner that has got us over the line and broken the game state open, but does it feel, watching Arsenal now, does it feel like it's corner or bust? The answer for me definitively is absolutely not. It feels like Arsenal have so many more solutions. Saka is adding more to his game as well. Not him necessarily improving, but how he's platformed tactically. We see sometimes Timber starting in these deeper areas, and we'll clear the drawings for now, and Saka actually abandoning that width. We've spoken about the narrow clustering, but Arsenal, if you think of the game as a box here, this isn't actually the most productive with how Arsenal are changing this season, because you'll see Timber here, yeah, he's ready to go high and wide on the overlap, but for now, with Saka starting off the shoulder, making more of these sort of blindside runs and having Zubimendi or Rice clip the ball over to him, you need to think more about Arsenal, on occasion, not always, playing without the corners. That's what I'm going to call it. Arsenal playing without the corners. Trossard was more of a wider role today. But Saka, he's adding more of these goal-getty runs to his repertoire. Of course he already had this, but he's being platformed more and more. Him drifting left, receiving again that inside pass from Timber, and then carrying on with momentum, carrying on further left to link the team together. But Arsenal playing without corners. Again, I'm going to do a proper video dedicated to this idea of how Arsenal are narrowing play when the time is right this season. But then if we just move it back to Saka individually, and I think against Fulham we saw how more and more he's got the half-space connections with different runners now. We've lacked in this Arsenal team for quite a while, and one of the differences between a Gyokeres and a Havertz is the arcing run from Gyokeres on the right-hand side with that strong-footed, right-footedness, and Havertz is more going to want to open up and come back in, and it lacks that directness of what the arcing run in behind can be. And more often with Fulham we saw it when they were much deeper, but Saka, whether it's Timber or Gyokeres, has that incisiveness with those balls and releasing runners inside that we've seen. He also is getting more and more chance to combine at speed with the different backboards that we've got, whether it's Eze or whether it's Timber, who's building a very nice relationship with Saka. And just the two-way threat on top of that with Saka as he's building back fitness, how reliable he is in that duel. And if you add to this, staying inside more and more now, there's still, although there hasn't been, I don't know if the corner will go down as assist for Saka. I don't know how many ricochets were in there, but this is a platforming of Saka where formerly he's had the responsibility, Saka, isn't it? And this is I think this is a really nice way to phrase it. Saka has had the responsibility placed on him where you're going to have to stay wide because you're going to have to carry us up the pitch on your own, essentially. You're going to have to bank and guarantee that final third access for us, be our solvent with foils, different foils around him. But now, with different solutions that we've got, we spoke about the left-hand sided threat with Calafiori, and we've spoken about the Rice and Zubimendi pairings and the central threat that we've got. Saka has more of a license to say, no, I want to be the more goal-getty guy. I want to make those runs off the shoulder, in behind. I want to abandon width, to play without the corners. Because Timber, a fully fit Timber can offer more of that as well, especially if it looks like he's starting with Ben White getting up to speed as well. So that's something to think about with Saka. And I want to speak about some more individuals now that we've done the more overarching tactical themes. I think the interesting thing with someone like Leandro Trossard is, well, he just scores goals. And I think that's sometimes the way to just explain him. Like I was saying, certainly with a Rice and a Calafiori left-hand side, who want, both of them, a lot of license through the half space. Essentially, if we move everyone back, then Trossard, although he's going to be lower touch and, well, I think in many regards he's going to be lower impact, but he can play the foil role, and I don't think he's always going to be... I think he can be frustrating at times because of how insistent he is with his passing to play through lines and to make a chance happen. But I think what we're seeing with this side, and I spoke about this again post-Newcastle, and a theme with this team is that we're seeing an urgency not from minute 80, but an urgency from minute 50 straight away. And that's sort of the same feeling that I got against Fulham. And it's just a really nice aggressive intent to see on show that we're going out to win the game straight away. And with Trossard again, he's scored goals, and it's so reductive to say, but sometimes players with that knack are worth their weight in gold ultimately. I'm just looking at my notes and whether anything else I want to touch on today. Gabriel, I think, defending the box at the end is, again, it's indomitable, the performances. I think Calafiori really did well in that duel against Adama Traore as well. And I think the thing with Gabriel is, I was speaking about how that word responsibility earlier and how he thrives on that. But I think that confidence that he can almost have in the rest of the group as a defensive unit now, and how he can more and more just focus on his job, which is dominating Jimenez or spilling wide to shut out sort of a runner through the half space. Gabriel once again felt like the man at the back for us, leading the line height, communicating, really setting our intent from the back. So once again, a brilliant performance from Gabriel. And again, I'm just looking whether I want to speak about, actually, if we move back to the final third, if we move back and we clear all the drawings, one of those things that we've been speaking about as a really effective way to break down blocks, of course, is the movement, timing and underlap with your wide man hinging lower to maximise that space, and how we did that for not just Calafiori but Gyokeres too, to good effect against Fulham. But what we've also seen, and this comes with how varied Rice and Zubimendi were in their heights, and certainly Rice's, I think, freedom to not just drop and get on the ball, but drive across the pitch, again, moving at those diagonals that we spoke about. And from here, I think the levels of incisiveness to certainly play over the top from us as a team is certainly a marked difference. And I want to, again, speak about, if we bring up these corners again, and actually leaving the corners, and how Saka and Timber, if you get Eze and then later Marino floating around centrally, and then Gyokeres on the shoulder, Rice and Zubimendi in these pivot positions will set Calafiori in the sort of 2-3-5 shape, how they were looking to clip over the top. And this is another thing about when I was talking about Arsenal flooding the box and choosing their moments to swarm. When Rice or Zubimendi plays that clip, what we're doing when we're clustering narrow, although we've previously stretched the pitch, when we're suddenly choosing to flood, we're actually giving such an overload of choices for this Fulham backline to make that we force them so much deeper in the box. And ultimately, what you're doing is you're promoting the conditions for Saka, but for Timber to slip on the blind sides. And then, if you can have Gyokeres, Eze, Saka flooding the box, Calafiori, Rice on those loose balls for those whips, that is a really nice, one of those more chaotic sequences that looks chaotic, but it's so full of intention. And like I said, we're going to do a dedicated video to how Arsenal are abandoning these corners, or the nuances, I think, to how they are playing more narrow and clustering centrally this season. Our central play isn't just, we're just throwing bodies narrow. There's a real deliberateness to it that I think has been missed so far in the analysis, and I'm going to speak about that in more detail. We've spoken about the importance of diagonal movements and how Arsenal, whether it's Rice leaving the shape or whether it's Zubimendi making one of those more ambitious off-ball darts, Saka's diagonal runs, Timber's arrivals with Eze in the half space at diagonals, how we're seeing an increase in diagonals. Oh my gosh, I've used the word diagonals so much there. But this is going to be my instant reaction, basically, for the Fulham game. I'm sort of trying out the technology more and more, so we'll get more streamlined with it as we go on. But I really, really hope you've enjoyed. I've got a marathon to run tomorrow, so that's why I can't sit and chat for ages. So I do need to go and get my beauty sleep. But I really hope you've enjoyed. I basically want to do these tactical reactions because I want to bring instant breakdowns, instant tactics to the reaction element of football. And I feel like that's been lost a little. And I think with Arsenal's clustering that was slightly different intent-wise to Newcastle, there weren't as more first touch bounce passes sequences. It was slightly different against Fulham, but to similar effect, we're trying to do similar things. From the role of Calafiori, the index, I think, of Timber, to this Arsenal team as a whole, the inevitability of Saka. We've gone through a lot, I think, in this sort of 20-25 minutes or so, and I really hope you've enjoyed. But I will leave you there, and I will join you back next week very, very shortly. This is a massive win for Arsenal, and it feels like a win that, again, many people will point to the corner goal being a kind of getting us out of jail. But for me, the intent and the ideas were completely antithetical about that, to that. And I hope you share similar sentiments. If not, get in the comments. I will be debating with you as always. But I really hope you've enjoyed this first of many instant reactions, instant tactical reactions on the Harvey Grayson YouTube channel. I'll catch you very, very shortly. See you later.